So I welcome you to the next topic, which is circular economy, and I very much welcome also Johan Terry into the studio. Johan has more than 20 years experience on the equity analysis side, sustainability analysis side, has been a portfolio manager for funds such as the Water Fund and Circular Economy funds over many, many years. So I'm very glad to have you here in the studio. And let's start and deep dive into the first question. So circular economy, like a few other topics, has been a buzzword over the last few years. It's been also a topic of regulation coming up. Could you just explain us, as a first question, what is it all about? What is the definition of circular economy?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you, René, for that question. Because the circular economy is not a really straightforward concept. And I like to define it in opposition to our current economic system, which is the linear economy. And in our economy today, we basically extract raw materials, we make products, we use them, and then they end up in waste. And today, 93% of the economy is such, and only 7% of materials are actually coming back into the economic system. Over the past decades, we have slowly trended towards recycling. So you all know what recycling means, but the circular economy really goes beyond that. It's really about minimizing what we take from the environment, the raw materials, and then to make the product which lasts longer. So we look at the design of the product, at their lifespan, and then we reuse them, repair them, and finally we recycle them and minimize the ultimate waste that end up in the environment.
So the largest part, and that's the reality of the economy today, are still functioning according to a, let's say, traditional model, as you have explained it. Can you give us an insight why this traditional model over the time and over the future coming is not a sustainable model?
Yes, that's very true. I mean, our current economic model has two major drawbacks. One relates to the extraction of finite natural resources, and secondly, because it generates a lot of externalities, so it has an impact on the environment, on climate change. And I wanted to illustrate that with those few key figures that you can see on that slide. I mean, first of all, humanity consumes 74% more biocapacity that the planet's ecosystem can regenerate. So it's as if we were using today 1.7 planets to address our needs. The second example is about food waste. 40% of the food grown today is never eaten. So our system really is very wasteful. And finally, 1.7 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean every year. So there is a massive environmental impact from our economic system.
So I see obviously that resource efficiency and the use of natural resources is one of the key aspects of the circular economy. Could you also start to explain us what makes it an attractive model to follow from an economic point of view?
I think a key message here is that without the circular economy, there's not really a possible sustainable development in the long run. It's really an overarching theme which is supporting all the other green policies, going from climate change to water to renewable energies. And why is that? It's because the circular economy brings significant benefits. First of all, to tackle resource scarcity. And we know that the energy transition will require, for example, a lot of metals, especially copper, and we will have to recycle more because otherwise there will be a supply-demand problem. Second, it's about pollution and climate change. As you know, like the circular economy minimizes what we extract from the environment, so it will minimize the impact in terms of arable lands or in terms of waste that are thrown into the environment. And an example here is recycled aluminium emits 8 to 40 times less CO2 than virgin production. So it's a massive difference versus virgin production. And finally, it's about economic independence. The circular economy would basically minimize the metals we use and keep them in the economic system. And we know that today there's more and more issues in terms of the supply of critical raw materials. And just an example here, 73% of cobalt today is basically coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
So I understand, obviously, that the topic of circular economy is very much linked to environmental issues and sub-themes. But you also mentioned economic independence, and that obviously triggers my interest. Could you explain to us why the term and the area of economic independence in the context of circular economies is starting to become more and more important?
Yeah, that's very true. That topic has been rising in importance in the past few years. And I think it really came first from the trade tensions between the USA and China. It started already back in 2008. Then we had COVID and the massive disruptions in the supply chain. And finally, the war in Ukraine. And all that reminded the Western world of their dependency on foreign countries for the import of critical raw materials. And you can see here on that map the concentration of all those key materials in countries which are basically not necessarily unstable, but where basically we have to import most of it to Europe. And Europe has actually identified like all of the 27 critical raw materials being at risk of instability and of issues in terms of supply.
So I think we have a much better understanding now of circular economy and about the different areas in which we have challenges in the future that we need to solve in some way or another. Now let's switch to the investment side. So where do you see opportunities associated with this specific theme, and where is the growth at the end of the day that we can extract from this theme?
Well, there are so many different opportunities, and it's hard actually to show like a big picture. We like to use this 4R principle, basically reduce, reuse, recycle, and replace. And within each of those buckets, there are many different sub-themes, going from the reduction of organic waste, so food, for example, but the second-hand economy, or renting as opposed to buying, of course, like recycling the different material streams, also like sustainable packaging. And each subsegment will grow at different rates, but overall, we estimate that the whole universe will grow at least 2 times the GDP.
Okay, very interesting. So we haven't touched so much upon regulation, but it's obvious that that theme, like many other sustainability themes, is driven, or regulation is a catalyst also for circular economy. Is there a risk that such regulation could also be a boomerang and be revised in the future?
So I mean, it's true. We often get the question, okay, it's entirely dependent on subsidies and support from the states. But what we have seen in the very recent past is a multiplication in the number of supportive regulatory framework in Europe, in Asia, and just this year in Europe there were 2 critical directives which were introduced actually supporting the circular economy. And why is that? In the context of budget constraints, actually we are seeing even more support, and that's because it's good for the environment, first of all, but not only. It's also good in terms of economic independence, as we said, but also for consumer protection. And I just wanted to add an example here. For those who had the chance to go to the Olympic Games, you could really see all the circular economy measures that were put in place, going from construction materials to the recycling bin, but also even the mascot was actually made of recycled fiber. So we can see that there is strong willingness to bring more circularity.
Okay, I think we understand the catalysts for growth. We also understand that the topic is very diversified across many different sectors and gives us a lot of opportunities. Could you help us with illustrations how these investment opportunities could look like, and what are you basically focusing upon in your portfolio?
Yes, a couple of examples. The first one is about the recycle and reuse category. And I like this example of salvage vehicles because, I mean, cars basically embeds a lot of CO2 emissions and also like metals, materials. And it's very important to properly recycle them or reuse them. And salvage vehicles are basically vehicles that were involved in an accident and are deemed too expensive to repair. And the insurance companies have to actually find a buyer for those vehicles so that they are properly refurbished or recycled. And there is a very interesting investment area here. It's the auction market for end-of-life vehicles. They are basically companies which have platforms which act as intermediaries so that the insurance companies can optimize the price you can get from the vehicles. And this sector is an oligopoly with very high profitability and is growing double digits since many years, and we expect that to continue. So it's a very good, interesting investment area.
So while I obviously hope that my car will never look like this, it's a great example. So do you have another one?
Yes, another example which is very important in terms of impact for the environment is construction, because construction generates the most waste globally, and 30% of all materials that enter a construction site actually end up as waste. And there are ways to reduce that waste, and that's the building information modeling software. And those software can actually save costs for the construction companies, but also waste at the same time. So it's really both economical and has a positive impact on the environment. And those software actually are allowing for more material optimization, clash detection, more collaboration. And so that brings a lot to those companies, and we expect that to grow by nearly 14% in the next 5 years.
I think we have understood quite well the challenges around circular economy and the growth opportunities that come from it. Now, growth alone doesn't mean necessarily a good investment performance. So what are the aspects in your investment process that you highlight and you focus upon in order to get a positive investment return?
So we now have at Swisscanto a fund dedicated to the circular economy, and there are 3 key characteristics. First, what we call our sustainable purpose quality approach. And here the idea is really to detect companies, quality companies, where the bottom line, so the earnings, are driven by the theme, by the circular economy. Secondly, it's about sustainability. We are one of the rare funds on circular economy, which is not only integrating ESG, focusing on the links with the Sustainable Development Goals, but also applying an alignment with the 2-degree climate scenario. And finally, it's about risk awareness. I mean, it might look like straightforward, but we spend a lot of time and we have many tools to really optimize the fund and make sure that we don't have like concentrated risk in the portfolio. So we are looking for diversification in terms of style, in terms of end markets, or in terms of business models.
So I highlight that the fund is obviously also classified according to Article 9 of SFDR, and therefore sustainability plays a great role. Let's deep dive a little bit the sustainable purpose quality dimension, which obviously is in the core and in the heart of the investment approach.
So the quadrant that you see on that slide basically shows where we focus our investment ideas, i.e. on the SDG leader with high quality. And what does that mean? That means that we look for companies which have a clear link with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we achieve that through our investment universe. Like circular economy is naturally aligned with the SDG goal 12, for example. And that brings the growth, because as we have seen already, we expect the universe to grow twice the GDP. And then we look for companies with high quality characteristics. That means basically high return capital, that means low indebtedness, management track record, etc. So we have a strong framework to identify those companies. And the combination of that growth with higher profitability basically leads to long-term value creation and outperformance of the strategy.
So if I would look at your portfolio, what would be the characteristics that stem out of your active selection, active portfolio construction, and have a chance to generate that outperformance that we are all seeking?
So we do have a long-term performance benchmark, which is the MSCI World. So the idea is to beat the MSCI World in the long run. That doesn't mean that we look at the MSCI World on a daily basis for risk analysis, because I mean it's first and foremost a conviction-based approach. We invest in the theme, so there are naturally some exposures to certain sectors like industrials, materials. We don't have restrictions on those sectors. We are clearly tilted towards mid and cap market cap companies because they have more impact and they are growing faster, and that's a way of playing the theme. And higher quality, I already mentioned it.
So to summarize it in 3 sentences, Johan, what are the USPs of the fund and why should we look at it and take it into consideration as an investment?
The circular economy is really an exciting investment opportunity because it's kind of undiscovered yet, with a very long tail of structural growth, very diverse, high-quality investment opportunities which are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. I think it's a good timing to invest in that topic because despite the budget restrictions, there is still a very strong momentum behind the circular economy, and the valuations of the companies have also fallen significantly, so there was a good entry point. And finally, Swisscanto has been managing thematic funds for many years, and the team has also a proven track record on looking at that topic, circular economy, and so yeah, we think it offers a very good opportunity for you.
So Johan, thank you very much for your comments and your explanations on this very important and very complex topic. Looking forward to talk to you in the future.